Welcome to Figuring Out Families by Magellan Media, where we help make families the best they can be. We're pleased to be joined by marriage counsellor and family expert Derek Boylen for what we are calling the Focus Sessions, aimed at helping families with relationship issues. Together with Derek, over a number of these sessions, we will explore the most pressing issues facing families today. We hope you enjoy and find this series valuable. Welcome back, Derek. We covered communications in the past two focus sessions, which went really well. It was also terrific having your children on board, Caleb, Jordan and Zachariah. How did they find the experience? Hopefully we didn't frighten them too much.
No, they had a great time. Thanks, David. They really enjoyed it. It was I gave them a little bit of a heads up beforehand that we'd invite them in, and they really had a great time. We had some very interesting lunchtime conversation afterwards, but it certainly was a good experience that they enjoyed. So thank you.
Oh, good to hear. Now, this session, we move from communications to love maps, which many people may not have heard of. I certainly haven't. Perhaps you could explain what love maps is all about.
Yeah, this is a really interesting sort of new development in the area of neuroscience, and certainly a researcher who's spoken a lot about it in his work is a man named Daniel Segal, and he's done a lot of work with children, teenagers, families, and I guess what he realized is that in all of our relationships, whether it's work relationships, next door neighbors, friends, siblings, couple relationships, is that what we do as people is we form internal maps of what other people's brains must look like in their world. So I guess when we think about it, the people in our lives, we can't know what they really think. We can't be inside of their heads and their minds. Those things are a black box. We can't see inside of it. However, as a relationship starts to develop with someone, we begin to create a map inside of our minds about what we think it must look like inside of their mind, right? So if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then that map that we create in our mind about what we think it must look like inside their mind is what we use to navigate the relationship. It's what we use to sort of determine whether we think it's safe to have certain conversations and not other conversations about what we think this person might be interested in and what their likes and dislikes might be and how to raise certain kinds of conversations. And John Gottman in his research really coined the term love maps, that actually that these are very, very important. These maps that we create inside of our mind are very important, particularly for how we navigate love relationships. So that doesn't necessarily mean couples, but any loving relationship. So between a parent and a child or between siblings. And in his research, what he found is that the couples and the families that tend to have the best, strongest, most fulfilling relationships, so the really healthy families, they also happen to have very detailed love maps. Like their understanding of what it must be like inside of the minds of other people in their relationships and families is usually actually very accurate. And So what they've found is that by having these detailed love maps, this helps us to navigate family life and navigate family relationships with the people that we care about, and to do it in a way that's safe and effective and healthy.
Right. Okay, so what's the process here with the love maps? How does it actually, do people record things? Do they put things down on paper or on a computer or whatever?
Yeah, well, I guess on one level, these things develop really naturally, right? They just develop as soon as we begin a relationship with someone, that we start to get an impression about what they like and what they don't like, and we base that on their body language, on how they respond to us when we relate to them in different ways. And as those love maps get better, we get better at expressing our needs in a way that that the other person can hear and understand. And it also helps us to meet the other person's expectations in a way that doesn't erode trust. I guess, trust in most relationships is eroded when we have a set of expectations of someone and a set of hopes or ways that we think that they'll relate to us. But then when that person doesn't fulfill those expectations, we feel hurt and trust is eroded. And so these love maps help us to protect trust in the relationship and help us to express our needs in a way that other people can hear. And so even though it happens naturally, couples can also become more intentional about how they do it as well, right? They can actually put in place strategies that are going to help them to do this more effectively. I'll give you an example of that. Years ago, Karen and I had a funny conversation, and it was about grace before meals. So in our family, we typically say grace before meals. And one of the things that would sometimes happen that used to really bug me a lot was that, I'd get home from work, often sometimes it'd be a bit late if I had clients in the evening, and it'd be right at dinner time, and Karen would be serving dinner out and putting it out on the table, and I'd walk in the door and we'd all be getting ready to start dinner. And if I was sort of still serving out my meal, or if I'd sort of got up to get the pepper or the salt or something, Karen would start grace with the kids just before I'd sort of sat down. And it used to just bug me. I just sort of thought, can't just wait 10 seconds until I sit down and then we can say grace together as a family.
Yes, yeah.
And I didn't say anything for a long time. I just sort of let it annoy me. But one particular afternoon, I sort of sat down. I said, you know what? I just thought I should talk about this. It does bother me, and I should talk about this. And so I said to Karen, look, when you start grace before I sit down, it sort of is a bit annoying. And Karen's response to that was, well, if you came home a bit earlier, that would probably be easier to do, right? Except that when you get home, I've got a toddler who is hungry who can't wait another 10 seconds. The food's right there in front of them and they want to eat. And so it's that 10 seconds is actually a big demand for the 2-year-old.
Yes.
And I could hear what she was saying, but we sort of persevered with the conversation. And one of the things that I realized in that, and I came to realize actually why it bugged me so much. And the reason why it bugged me so much was that in our family, growing up, my family as a child, we had sort of set places at the dinner table, right? So every time we sat down for dinner as a family, we had sort of set places to sit. And my place was closest to the pantry in our home. Right. And so when, as a family, we sat down for dinner, if there was something missing off the table, so the bread or the butter or the pepper or the salt, my dad would typically say, Derek, could you grab the pepper or could you grab the salt or whatever it might be? Yes. And almost always, as soon as I got up to go and grab it, they would all start grace. and I remember at about year 9, so about 14 or 15 years of old, I have a distinct memory of thinking one day when I have a family, I am never going to do this to my kids. Right? Sure. It really annoys me. It's like I'm not even a part of the family. They can all kind of get going with grace and, don't worry about Derek. He's sort of serving us. Yeah. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to do that to my family. And yet here I was in my own family and it was still happening to me. And, yes. And so that's really where that frustration sort of originated. Right. But once I actually had a way of expressing that to Karen, it really changed our way of relating as a couple around this issue, because Karen could see, for me, I could hear Karen and understand, okay, it's really tough for you when the toddler is really hungry and is wanting food. And Karen could understand for me that this is actually, it's linked to actually something bigger, a bigger experience for me. And we're better able to be sensitive to one another's needs. That for me to know that when I get home late, it is really tough for Karen. And, she's been having a hungry toddler for the last half hour who wants to eat. And for Karen to know sometimes when we start grace early, that it's not just an annoyance. It actually, there's a hurt that goes with that as well. Yeah. So what these love maps do when couples can learn how to talk, more deeply about their internal world and what's happening for them, is it helps them to be more sensitive. It actually sort of, helps them to grow closer to one another.
Sure, which in turn obviously leads to better intimacy, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they come to really appreciate in a deep way each other's needs. And I suppose intimacy is what makes intimacy is our level of vulnerability. When we're emotionally intimate, we reveal our deepest emotions to someone that we care about, and we risk ridicule, we risk rejection, but in the interest of building greater trust and understanding. So love maps are something really important, and being intentional about how we build our love maps can really help.
Yes, absolutely. Do you believe couples generally would benefit from love maps?
Absolutely, definitely. And there's lots of actually practical things that they can do to grow their love map. It's actually very, very important, because we can't be inside of the mind of the person that we love. we can only guess at what's in their mind. And the more we work at developing a comprehensive map and understanding, a love map of their internal world, the better we can respond to their needs, and the better we can help them to respond to our own needs as well. Gottman, actually, if couples are interested, the Gottman Institute, so John Gottman, who coined the concept of love maps, actually produces an app on smartphones. It's called the Gottman Card Deck. And it's free. They can just download it, and one of the options on there is love maps, and it just has a whole heap of different questions for couples to discuss. All sorts of questions. Questions like, what was the best present you ever received, and who were your closest friends growing up, and what's your favorite kind of music, and those sorts of things. And I often give couples for counselling that kind of homework to work on. Go away, and I'll give them a list of topics, things to discuss and talk about. And the idea is to talk about them with a view to learning something new, not to try to get the answers right, but actually to learn something about my partner that I actually never knew before. So, so an example would be, say, one of the questions is, what was the best present you ever received? And you might know what the best present your partner ever received was. So in which case you might want to ask them, what was the worst present you ever received? Or what was the most interesting present you ever received? Or was there ever a time where everyone forgot your birthday and no one gave you a present? And what was that like? How did you cope with that? Yeah. Couples need to be curious about all sorts of different aspects about their partner's life in order to grow their love map.
Yeah, I imagine if that curiosity stops, then the relationship certainly needs some work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I kind of think, there's always something new to learn about the people that we're in relationships with, because they're growing and they're constantly growing and changing and becoming new all the time. And there's always something new to discover in that.
Yeah. How important, Derek, is it for couples to have shared, similar values?
Look, I think having shared values can really help, and particularly at the start of a relationship, it can help with sort of integrating the relationship and to at least us feeling like we're on the same page about things. But it's really important to keep in mind that our ideas and our views and our values around things are constantly changing and growing and maturing and developing. And so, as we've talked over past sessions, communication is really key in all of that. That as we grow and mature, if we keep communication open and we keep talking about the things and the experiences that we're having, it helps us to converge in our values. It helps us to grow closer to one another and develop a common understanding about what's really important for us. But I think one of the other things that's really helpful for love maps is to, when we recognize that our partner has a value, to be really curious about where that value comes from. I kind of think it's really interesting that we use the word value. I mean, the value of something is its cost, right? Is how much it costs for us to have something. And values that we hold really deeply, typically for most people, came at a cost. That if we really value honesty, we experience dishonesty. If we really value loyalty, we experience, times in our life where people weren't loyal to us. If we really experience value being close to others, it probably comes out of an experience of having felt lonely. And so I think one of the great things for couples to help build their love maps is when they realize that their partner has a strong value in a particular area, ask them where that came from. So, I really noticed that your family is so important to you. How did you come to value family so much? I see that working hard and a good work ethic is really important to you. How did you come to value that? Often there's something really beautiful to learn about the challenges that they've experienced throughout their life and how they came to value the things that are really important to them. So having common values helps, and being curious about one another's values definitely helps with forming love maps.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I mean, you could have a father or a grandfather, you talk about work ethic, who may have had a wonderful work ethic, and it does pass on, whether it's passed on in the genes or through learned experience, I don't know necessarily, but that makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. Certainly an example would be, for me, one of the things that a value that's very strong in me that was sort of passed on by my father was the importance of speaking up for those who don't have a voice. That some people are vulnerable and that we need to stand up for those people and to have a voice for them. And years ago, I really found myself thinking this is a really important value that my father passed on to his children. Yes. And I found myself wondering, where does that come from? How did he come to value that? And he came to value it from having a really difficult relationship with his own father, who would drink sometimes and found it very difficult to relate to. And he realised as a young boy that there was something wrong there. That a dad's job is to stand up for his children, and to advocate for them. And so he realised for himself that he didn't ever want to be that kind of a father in relationship to his children. So he paid the price. He paid a cost, to come to value that, which then he passed on to us. Exploring our values and our values in relationship with people that we love and care about is a really great way to grow closer and to understand them better and to know how to better to love them and support them and respond to their needs.
Right. Love maps, should couples revisit it every so often? I mean, they might begin with it perhaps 5 years later, 10 years later, or is it a continuous thing?
Look, I think it should be and both. I guess is the answer to that question. I think it's something that they should typically be curious about all the time. But certainly, I really encourage couples, in every area of our life. Maintenance is important. If you have a home, it needs to be maintained. If you have a car, it needs to be maintained. If you have a career, it needs to be maintained, through professional development. And relationships are no different. If you really value your relationship, then you want to do things that constantly sort of update and check in and grow your marriage or your relationship. And there are some really fantastic, we live in a generation unlike any previous generation. There are programs like Marriage Encounter and Smart Loving and Ministry to the Newly Married and other programs that are all designed to help couples just to take stock, check in. How are we going? How are we traveling? What do I need to learn that's new about you? And what do you need to learn about me? And at the same time, we have to be curious on an ongoing basis. One of the things that is a question that Karen and I have become really good at asking one another in our relationship, when we realize that something sort of is not right, is to simply say, what's going on for you right now? We ask it in a gentle, loving way. I can see things aren't quite right. What's happening for you? What's going on for you? And to be genuinely open and curious, it helps us to better understand each other's internal world.
Yeah, well, that's a nice suggestion. Actually, that's something perhaps couples should do very regularly, but perhaps many don't.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a tip that a couple shared with me. One of the habits I have is whenever I meet couples who have really great marriages, just beautiful relationships, I always ask them, what's the secret? You guys have an amazing marriage. What's the secret to a good marriage? And I always encourage couples to do that. You'll come across all sorts of random advice that is profoundly wise. And these days, I don't usually hear a lot that I haven't already come across in research or other contexts. But I did last year ask a couple who'd been married for 30 years. I asked the wife, what's the secret to a happy marriage? And she made one suggestion I've never come across anywhere before, and I thought it was gold. She said, in about the 5th year of their marriage, they started having the weekly interview. And the weekly interview for them happens every Sunday night, and they sit down on a Sunday evening after everything's sort of finished and the kids have gone to bed. And there are 2 questions, and it's the same 2 questions week after week. And the first question is, when did you feel most loved by me this week? Of all the different things that happened, tell me one time when I got it at least kind of right, so that I kind of know how to do more of that. And what's one thing I could do this week to love you more? And she said, it's a very specific question. She said that one. It's not like, oh, you could be more patient. It was more like, on Thursday, I've got a meeting. I'm really stressed about it. Just be patient with me Thursday morning. Yeah. But I thought, isn't that a profoundly beautiful question? Companies spend billions of dollars on marketing research every single year, and we don't do it in our own relationships. We don't ever sort of think to ask, tell me how I'm getting it right. My family is my number one customer. Give me some feedback about what I'm doing right and what I can do better for you. Let me into your world about the times when I do things kind of right. What happens inside of your mind, so I can do more of that because I care about you. Yes,
some of the most simple things are the most effective, but we don't always think that way, do we?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true.
Yeah. Now, love maps for couples, you've explained that really well. Generally, for a family, love maps still work in a similar sense. Couples who've got children, I imagine when you've got children, as you would know, it gets a bit more complex. So love maps will perhaps play an even more important role in some respects.
Oh, I think it's really important to develop, strong love maps with our children, and there's I guess a couple of ways that that certainly that Karen and I have discovered over the years that worked really well. And the first was a tip that my sister-in-law, her father, actually shared with me, and I thought That's fantastic. We're going to plug that into our family life, and certainly it's helped. And for us, one of the things that we just do every single day when we sit down for dinner as a family, the first question that I ask, and that as a family, that's over most of the last 18 years, we've just got in the habit of discussing, is just going around, just really briefly around our dinner table, and just sharing what was the best part of your day. Just what was the best thing that happened to you today. I guess when little children are small, the best part of their day is, I don't know, they built the biggest Lego tower. It doesn't sound very sort of exciting or special. But, by the time a child reaches 14, 15, 16 years of age, as a parent, I really want to know, what are the things that bring my child life? What are the things that bring them happiness and fulfillment? What are the things that they're thinking about and are the places of joy? And it's really hard to start that conversation with them at that age. That you need to sort of start that conversation way back when they're 2 and they're 3 and they're 4 and 5 years old. So it becomes a normal part of our life to engage in the things that bring one another joy and to celebrate those things together. And a meal is a great place to do that, to celebrate each other's joys and successes through the day. Yeah. The other thing that we started doing with our kids, around about the age of 11 for our kids, we started having a sort of a weekly catch-up with each of our children. It's got a little bit more challenging, and it's changed as our family's sort of grown and expanded. But at about the age of 11, we sort of sit down with each of our kids and we just sort of explain that, look, for the last 10 years, you've been a child. And in the next 10 years, you're going to go from being a child to being an adult. And there's lots of really important things that you need to know about how to be an adult. And so we have a weekly catch up. It's only about half an hour once a week with each of our kids. And in that half an hour, at the very beginning when they're just 11, 12, a lot of those conversations are about, puberty, about changes and relationships and things that they sort of need to know. But gradually that changes to being less things that mum and dad want to talk about and more things that they want to talk about. But we've established a pattern early on that if there are things that you're struggling with and you want to talk to mum and dad about them and grow in understanding, well, this is a good time. This is your half hour. No one's going to interrupt. And we really want to know what's happening in your world. We want to know what the things are that you're struggling with. And we want to help, you to work out how to be an adult and how to navigate challenging relationships. So it's really important, I think, in understanding our children's love maps, what's happening in their minds to set a foundation for that and wherever possible, as early as possible, so that it becomes a pattern that we can talk about things that are important. And I can't read their mind. I don't know what happens inside of their little brains. No. But the more I lean into asking and being genuinely curious, the more they're willing to open up and help me to understand what might be important to them and how best to love them. Yeah.
No, that's a wonderful idea. And you're spending valuable time too, one-on-one time with your child. Or in your case,
absolutely.
Your kids.
And it's amazing. I've got to say, David, that there are some times where our kids come to me with a conversation, or Karen, and I think I could never imagine having this conversation with my mother or father. That actually I'm learning something new just as much as they're learning something new, which is how to have this kind of conversation. And I think the reason that they feel comfortable to be able to do that is because we've really worked hard at just laying that foundation of trust. It's not enough just to wait till the urgent situation to try and have that conversation. We just have to create that framework as we go, week in and week out, that enables that space to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Derek, if after 10 years a spouse or partner doesn't know what their other half's favourite movie or food is, would you suggest they discover love maps?
Oh, absolutely. I think they will probably discover a whole new world of their relationship that they never knew existed. It's always interesting to me when couples say, oh, well, we've just sort of fallen out of love, or, we just sort of don't connect with one another. Actually, couples can regain that experience of falling in love. Emotions are kind of fickle, and it's not like they love their spouse their whole lives. When they were 2, 3, 4, 5, they didn't even know that person, that love grew out of an experience and a way of relating to one another, and couples can always rediscover that in their relationship. And we know a lot about how to help couples to do that as well. But certainly starting with love maps, asking lots of really interesting questions about what was the favorite memory, what was the best thing I ever did for you, what was the favorite anniversary that we ever celebrated, what's your favorite movie these days, what kind of genre do you like, what's your favorite color. These things change all the time. I
Yes,
remember when Karen and
sure.
I first got married, Karen's favorite color was undeniably burgundy. Everything was burgundy. Our bath mats were burgundy. Our towels were burgundy. But I can tell you right now, if I kind of went, I'll just do something special for Karen, and I went out and bought a new set of towels and bath mat that was burgundy, Karen would be like, yeah, you kind of know that dark blue is my favorite color right now, right?
Yeah.
What do you think? So we can't just assume that we always know because we worked it out once before. We need to constantly be growing those things, and it is. I think it's exciting to discover new things about our partner and to have them discover and value new things about ourselves as well.
Sure. Yeah. No, exactly. I didn't know your favourite colour could change over time. Mine has always been blue, and it has been since I can remember. But there you go.
Yeah. Yes. Certainly. I think I started out with green, but I'm kind of more blue now.
Yeah. Fair enough. Derek, how do family holiday adventures fit into the concept of love maps?
Yeah, holidays are actually one of the most important things that families can do. And by holidays, I don't mean just taking time off work at home. I mean actually going on an adventure, taking a holiday, going somewhere different. It's kind of a little bit difficult for many families at the moment because of COVID-19. But
Yes.
certainly it's something for them to prioritize and to try and find ways of having family adventures. And it doesn't necessarily mean going on a holiday, going away, but trying new things, having new experiences. When families go on holiday, three really important things take place. The first is that they increase their learning curve. Most families typically have their biggest arguments when they're on holiday or planning to go on holiday and packing to get out of the house. But they also have their deepest moments of connection as well when they're on holiday. They suddenly find themselves in a new environment, relating to new people in new situations. And they learn a lot more about one another than they do on a typical Wednesday night sitting in their living room watching what they normally do. So there's a learning curve that helps them to grow in their understanding of one another and grow their love map about who this person really is and how they deal with different situations. The second thing is that they create memories, and even the terrible holidays actually in time often become good memories. I think of one year Karen and I went down south and the car broke down, and it was just before we had to take a trip, and we were stuck down there for 3 days to literally the day we had to fly out the next day. And at the time it was stressful, but I look back and I kind of go, it was one of the best 3 days of my life. Just us. We couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't do anything. It was just us. And so we enjoyed the time that we had together. And I guess the third thing is that, one of the things I mentioned Daniel Segal earlier, and the researcher, he's a Canadian researcher, and he often says that brain cells that fire together wire together. That we develop certain patterns of behavior that are tied to experiences. So if we get into a certain pattern about talking about our finances in our living room, well, every time we talk about it in our living room, we tend to fall into the same way of talking to one another. That sometimes, actually, when families are on holiday or they're out having an adventure, they discover that they can actually talk about an old issue, but talk about it in a new way. That there's no prescribed way of talking about this issue when we're sitting beside the pool or we're walking through the bush, or we could have this conversation in a new, different kind of a way. And because they're wanting to have a good time, they get a bit more solution-focused rather than problem-focused. Rather than get bogged down in who started what and if you hadn't done this, if we didn't make that bad decision, they kind of get a bit more focused on, what, as soon as we solve this, we can get on with having a good holiday. And so they do get a bit more solution-focused, and it creates a new freedom to be able to talk about sometimes some old, difficult, tricky issues in a new way. So holidays can't underestimate how important they are for families. Just take a break from the daily grind and to do something that's fulfilling. So one of the things Karen and I do is we try to, at least every 3 weeks, try to schedule into our family life at least one thing that we're going to do as a whole family that serves no other purpose than to bring us joy.
Okay.
Just something that is fun, whether that's a movie night and we're just going to order pizza and sit on the floor and watch a movie together as a family, or whether we're going to go out for a picnic at a park. One year we went on on a park crawl. And so we just picked a whole heap of parks with all different climbing equipment and flying foxes and all sorts of things. And we just basically went from park to park. You know, we played for about 15, 20 minutes till we got bored and off we went to the next park. And it was just fun and it was joy-filled. And I really encourage couples and families to just prioritize fun. You know, it's really important.
Yeah, it's a little bit different to your average pub crawl by the sound of it.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. I did say to Karen, you know, this kind of be a bit nicer if we had a bottle of wine to take with us.
Yeah, exactly. Take it on the Flying Fox. It'd be great fun. We're almost out of time with this session. Perhaps just if you want to reiterate a couple of main points about love maps that you think people would be interested to hear again.
Yeah, I think love maps are, as I said there, the way that we develop an understanding of what it's like to be inside the minds of the people that we care about. And if we can do that and grow our understanding, be curious about how people in our family feel and how they think and about their experiences, you know, in life, then it really helps us to be more responsive to the needs of our family members. And it helps us to better understand and appreciate the members of our family when we can really get into a deeper understanding of where they're coming from. And they're very easy to develop. You know, we just have to be curious and ask curious questions and to work on the relationship. And as we do that, you know, almost all families discover new levels of intimacy, which is always comes with it a sense of connection, a sense of belonging, and a sense of safety, which is really important for healthy families.
Okay. Derek, thank you very much. Our next session or chat, problem solving and relationship repair. That sounds interesting too.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's inevitable for every family that they're going to have times where they have challenges that they face, and when things, despite their best efforts, all sort of blow out. And what do we do in those situations? How do we repair those situations is a key skill to develop for every family.
Can't wait. Derek, thanks again.
You're very welcome, David. Thank you.